So now I have this picture in the diffuse color, and lo and behold, nothing's changed. Okay, so by default, when you throw a texture on the object, it's not going to map the image that you put on there. It's just going to map the color changes that we've done, because the color works, but the highlights work, but not the texture map. So to get that to work, we need to click on this button up here where it shows this checkerboard sphere. And if I say show shaded material and viewport, you click on it, and now that texture is showing up on the object. Okay, that's one of those key things, and you can tell by the unwrap that it's all yahooed. Okay, that's one of the things that you have to get used to, is to remember. This is an easy one to forget. It's like when you're inside a substance and you forget to bake the materials first thing, somehow it's not working correctly. Well, always remember to check this. Have the object selected and make sure this is on, because if I don't have that on and I click off of it, even if I turn this on and off and this isn't attached to it, it's not going to make a difference. So turn that on. There you go. Now let's talk about, so that's a picture. That's the diffuse channel, right? So we have that set up. What if we wanted to put this into, let's say, the bump? Well, all we do is drag that dot, which you saw me do earlier, and throw it onto there. And if it actually had something to do, it would do it right there. But as you can tell, the bump's turned way down there. And there's really not enough information to make this look right. So let me turn the specular down and see if I can get it to show up a little bit better. Yeah, the bump map is, on a white thing, it's just not going to work too great. But let's try a different bump map. So I'll take this and I'll drag it off, and then I'll come over here, say materials, and say general, and maps, not materials, and then say checkerboard. And for some reason, there. Okay, I do want to point this out too. This may or may not happen. If you have this selected, this object selected, and you put that on, that, and see how it's red, that's different than having the whole material show up. So if I do it now, it's different, and this is red, meaning this is the control. This may be why it didn't show up before too. No, it's just really not strong enough. So plus it's a sphere and it's unwrapped weird. I'm going to take this checkerboard and I'm going to drag its dot to bump and see if we can get anything to show up. Let me turn off this. There. Yeah, I'm not even seeing it at all. Yay, bump map. So let me come back up to here, make sure I have everything showing up. We'll just get rid of this for now. Oh, it's still down to 30. Huh. That's funny. It's not working great. Let's see if it's just because it's a sphere. Let's bring a box out here. Front C. And we'll throw that same material on it. And, let me see, maybe, let me check one more thing here. Oh, that's why. Because it doesn't show up in the real-time viewport. Again, another reason that it doesn't make sense to use this, because you're not actually seeing real-time changes to this object. You could try and see if we change it to higher quality, if it'll show up. Yeah, so the high quality, there you go. It shows up on a high quality. But by default, if it's not working, always check and see if your standard mode is set up. DirectX mode, it doesn't show up either, which is hilarious. So anyway, there you go. So I've got it showing up now, and I've got these. So I'm going to try and see what happens if I do this again. And this. And come up here, make sure it's all showing up. And there you go. You can see there's little bitty bumps around it. And if you can't see that, let me do this. There you go. So bump map only looks at the light and dark values of the object. So because of that, it's only showing me where it seems darker and lighter, and you can see how it's breaking it up and the resolution and all that stuff. But I could also say negative and make it invert that extrusion, the fake extrusion. So if I turn this back onto here, you'll see There it is. So let's take that off and let's try some other stuff. Let's see. This may be a good map to use for this anyway. So what else can we do? What else are we looking to do? I'm going to get rid of that by pushing delete. If I drag this one onto spec level, let's see what we get. Okay. So as you can see, what it's going to do is wherever it's light, it's going to show you specular highlights, and wherever it's dark, it will pull back on. So if we look at this and we turn it around, and by the way, it overwrites what you have in here. If I change this to 0, it won't change a thing in here. But there you go. You can kind of see there's his arm and his head, and there's his face, and that's all just a highlight. If I pull this glossiness out and make it bigger, you'll see that highlight, that reflection shows up on that texture. So that's kind of cool because now you can see how that works. It's just using the darks and lights of this object to make the specular highlights define better. Let's try glossiness. We'll pull this down, go to here. Now, we're not going to see it too well because the specular level is really low, so let me turn that back up. So, all of a sudden, one of the things I want you to realize is it's inverted, right? So if we looked at this, before, it was the darker areas that get receded, meaning they don't get the highlights from the specular, but the lighter areas get the highlight from the specular and the darker areas get pushed back. Well, it's the opposite for gloss, and honestly, it's the opposite for roughness. The lighter areas are the active areas, and the darker areas are the inactive areas. And the reason that is because you're basically saying positive and negative. If I want something highlighted, I positive that, and that's the area that's being pushed back. So anyway, this is how that works. And if I do both, let's see what happens. Specular level, bam. Now I'll get a sharper in some areas and darker in others. And now it's going to give me this. See how that highlight's working now? Again, let me turn that off, and it's just all over. I put the gloss back on, and now it's giving me control over the specular highlight that it's going to use in certain areas. Whereas if I turn this off, it's just, oops, I don't know where my sphere went. There it is. It's doing that. Now ignore this down here. That's a reflective, bad math stuff. So, you know, it's really cool that you can take this and make this highlight now scroll across the object a lot more understandably. Okay. So that's specular and gloss. Self-illumination, let's turn these two off. And if I take this and throw it on self-illumination, you'll see that the areas that, and what we're seeing here, let me turn down this highlight here, is that the areas that are white are illuminated and the areas that are not illuminated. So what that means is that the white is brighter and the dark is less bright. So why isn't it showing color? Because this doesn't define the color. It's not the way the engines work. A lot of times self-illumination or emission actually controls the color that comes out of the object. But in this case, it doesn't for self-illumination. If I take and drag this up to diffuse too, you'll see now it's brighter in some areas and darker in others. And let me print that highlight back on real quick. Okay. So see how that highlight moves across and then suddenly it disappears? And it may be think because it's white, but really it's because when you have a self-illuminated thing, it first off, it kills your shadows. So you can see there's no shadows in this area. And second off, it won't pick up highlights because it's overwriting the highlight too. So we'll take that off. Opacity. So in theory, this should be completely opaque and this darker stuff should start to have transparencies to it. So let's see. There we go. And it's seeing through itself, and the inside of it, it's actually not using the opacity because that's not the way opacity works by default. You can come inside of here and see if it's two-sided, if it works. Yeah, so it's still not really showing what we would think it would show. But again, what we're seeing here, oh, here, I can do it this way. Come here, grab this, say, object properties. For it to not show the interior because it's really not there, I have to turn on backface call and say okay. And that's unexpected. Turn this off. oh, because it's gradations, what I'm seeing is part of this seeing through to the gray. It just looks like it's green. Turn off the highlight too. So in this case, I'm going to use a different map just to explain it better. I'm going to untake this one off. I'll come down here, go to maps, go to general, and we'll check out that checker again because it's really straightforward. Take this, and we'll throw the checker onto the opacity, and now you can see what I'm seeing. It's just because this color, they weren't stark black and white, it was gradation, so it looked like it was seeing through, and our background is so neutral that it kind of it fooled what we were actually looking at. But that's really what's going on. If I throw this picture back on here, oops, that, there you go. Okay, so that's cool. Reflection, honestly, that should be done with math, but you can fake it. So let's take this off. I'll take this and delete it. We'll drag this one to reflection. And basically, it's just trying to deform the shape so it looks like it's reflecting on the object. It's the picture. So really, you don't see the object being textured. It's supposed to be a reflection outside of the object. And the sharper that is, or the less you have on your reflection amount, so it's at 100, if I do 50, we'll see more and more. Let's do 20 or 10. We'll see more of the object here. Push the wrong button. So there you go. See how it's turning around now, and it just seems more like a reflection. You'll see that it's higher over here in the differential highlights and stuff. Okay, and refraction, I'm not even sure what this was going to do. Refraction is a very high-end math thing, so a picture doesn't work great on it. If you want refraction, the best thing to do is, and by the way, I think you can also do it this way, and then pick from here if you drag out. I'm going to go to General, and I'm going to come down to Ray Trace, because what that does is it kind of like a normal, it'll shoot out a light. The problem with ray trace in this case is that it's seeing through itself and seeing nothing on the other side. So let's see if we put this back in here, if we get anything better now. Specular is, or refraction is actually a hugely mathematical thing that a lot of game systems don't do. That's why glasses in games look like crap. Okay. For rendering though, it may actually, that's probably another thing. It may not show up till you render. Let me see if I render here. Yeah, it still doesn't show up. You need to have something to refract against. There's no plane, there's nothing refracting. If I put a plane down here, it still may not. Yeah, it's just not made for this kind of setup. I mean, obviously. Refraction is just a higher end mathematical calculation, and if it comes up, then we can work with it and make it work the way you want. Like I said, they also changed their renderers recently, so it's a little bit of a dance. Okay, so that said, that's the basics of Material Editor. I'm not going to go through every map type because every map type, there's just so many options. We could spend weeks on Material Editor if we knew we were going to be rendering everything. So if I right click here, or if I even better yet, we'll come out to here, you'll see there's tons of map types. Maps, there's also tons of environmental maps. There's some pre-made ones, and the scanline renderer doesn't work for the OSL. And then there's some, let's see, general, scanline. Architectural ones in here somewhere too, which I haven't used in a while, so yeah, they're in here somewhere. We aren't going to use them because we're going to build all our textures and put all our shaders on everything inside of Substance Painter or Designer eventually, and then we're going to use that straight into Unity.